Hi. So this makes these kids mad. They're mad. They're mad. They're big mad. Because of this. Big mad. I'm
What are you here for? What are you here for?
I'm here for you, and I'm here for my girls in prison, and I'm here for Posey Parker, and I'm here for the fucking truth.
So my name is Lierre Keith, and I am one of the founders of Wolf, and I'm currently the board chair. And I am here right now with Amie Ichikawa, who runs an organization called WomanIIWoman, and they advocate for women in prison and women leaving prison. And right now, one of her main focuses is this horrendous situation that's happening where men are being put into women's prisons. And she's working with Wolf, and we are doing our best to advocate for those women. In the meantime, a crazy thing happened last weekend. There was a Korean spa, traditional Korean spa in Los Angeles called the We Spa, who at the spa, they have to follow the laws of California. They're in California. And we have had self-identification here for a while. And self-ID means that anyone can just decide what sex they are. You can just decide you, quote, feel like a woman, and therefore you have all the legal rights of a woman. And this has meant that at places like spas where people are naked, men have felt completely like they have a right to just go into the women's space. So there have been a number of flare-ups of this because most people don't realize how bad it's gotten, that this is in fact legal in California. And one of those happened last week. So there was footage that went viral, and a very brave woman came out of the women's area and confronted the employees of the spa, announcing that there was a naked man in the women's area, that there were little girls in there. She was very angry. She has every right to be angry. She tried to get them to do something, and of course they couldn't, because it's illegal in California for them to name him as a man and remove him. Until 5 minutes ago, we all knew that a man exposing his penis to little girls was a problem. Now it's not. Now it's a civil right. So she was mad. All the other women were angry. You see them all in the video. And she tries to get someone to do something, and nobody will. As a result of all of this, there was a protest last Saturday at the spa where people came to, I mean, it seemed from the footage that there were people from very many political perspectives there, trying to make whatever point they wanted to make. A little bit chaotic. I wasn't there, but Amie was there. So she's going to tell you what she saw, what she thought about it all. Some of this is a little bit disturbing, so buckle up. We're here for the ride. So what brought you there, Amie, and what happened? Sort of give us the blow by blow.
Thank you, Lierre. Well, first, let me explain. I had absolutely no education or prior knowledge of what a protest really means. I kind of had this picturesque idea of a rally in my head. I definitely thought it was going to be us on one side, the opposition on the other side, and the police in the middle. And that's definitely not what happened. I was very caught off guard by the number of people who were in opposition to a naked man getting into a jacuzzi area with, really young little girls. I was very surprised at the fact that anybody would be in opposition to that. I couldn't, and they were in droves. There were hundreds of people there that were defending this, and I couldn't really wrap my mind around it. But everybody, as soon as I got there, everybody was extremely angry. It was a really heavy, intense vibe that was just full of anger. And I was so excited. I can't, like there was a picture of me taking a selfie. I'm so excited because this was like my first protest. And I was thinking, oh, and I'm gonna go learn about women's rights and be with other women that are excited to stand up for our spaces. And that's not what happened at all. As soon as I parked the car, you could just, it would like hit you in the face, the vibe that was there. It was very tense. There was a lot of tension. It was so thick you could pretty much. It was tangible. You could feel it. And I was confused because there were people that their messages were extremely confusing. The symbols on the flags themselves. There were a lot of people that had press insignia on all their clothes, which got them that much closer to the assaults as they were occurring. So there was head-on footage of all kinds of people getting beat up. But initially, I parked, I was excited. I'm walking through crowds of very pissed off people and I'm smiling. And I kind of just kicked back. I just wanted to be a bystander. I just wanted to see what was going on. And I didn't get close. I didn't have a sign. I didn't have a pipe or anything. It was just me, my boyfriend, and I actually met up with a couple of ladies from Twitter. When we finally saw each other, I crossed the street. Everything seemed, it was moving really fast, but I had no idea like what I was walking into. As soon as we got into the crosswalk, everybody's screaming, FDP, and the presence of LAPD was huge. It was huge. I think the entire Rampart division was there. As a matter of fact, the streets were full of Black and white units and police. And the mobs were just seething. I had never seen so many angry, nice little potpourri of pissed off young adults. I sound like a really old person, but they were mad. They were mad and they were screaming, screaming that everybody was transphobic. Anybody who wasn't screaming FDP was, being honed in on as a transphobe. And that, in my case, couldn't be farther from the truth. Not really anti-anybody, anti-pedo. I'm definitely anti-pedo. And that's the heart that I went with. I thought everybody was anti-pedo. But I met with the more seasoned ladies across the street, and they were very surprised that I had on my Posey Parker shirt, but I didn't think that a t-shirt was that, well, I guess I was kind of testing the waters. I knew it was offensive, but I didn't think it was going to be offensive at this specific event that, I thought was to protest something that it just turned into something that it wasn't advertised as. But I had no idea who organized the event. I don't know who sent out the original flyers. I just went as a bystander. But once,
it's been unclear to me who organized it too. I have tried to track it down, but I haven't found the origin of it. So I don't actually know who put out the call for this protest. So, I mean, that's kind of interesting that like none of us really know. So you don't know what you're getting into because you don't know, what their basic values are. You don't know what kind of protest they're asking for. You don't know what sort of behaviors to expect. I will say though that, at any point prior to the last few years, if you had gone to a protest, I think what you were expecting was probably what you would have seen, where people might have been angry, but there would have been a basic sense of civility about it. I've been to, countless protests, and it's really rare that you would have seen this kind of meltdown until really recently. I've been to protests at military bases. I've been arrested at like really high intensity kind of situations. And the kind of stuff that's happened over the last few years just seems like madness. I've just never seen anything like it. And it's not good.
No.
We're supposed to have a First Amendment. We're supposed to have the right to gather and to express ourselves. And that is being taken away because of the violence. The violence, on both sides. We know that the right does this, but we need to name the left as well, that there is this ever-growing authoritarian streak where their goal is to shut down speech. And I am appalled as somebody who has spent her entire life on the left to see one of our basic values just be utterly trashed is horrifying. And the fact that people have now taken up violence as if it's a legitimate form of speech is, I don't know where people think this ends, because the whole point of democracy is that we talk to each other. instead of being violent with each other. And that really is the best way to find, the best form of society that we can hope for will only come from us being able to sit down and figure out what's going to work for everyone. And that's why you need a free press, so that you can have a free flow of ideas. And that's what we're supposed to have in terms of being a democracy. And all of that is gone if you take away speech and our ability to assemble and our ability to discuss. And it is the left now just as hard pushing for that shutdown. And I just can't tell you how appalled I am to watch all of this. So I'm really sorry that was your first protest, because I mean, really at any point prior to maybe the last 3 or 4 years, you could have had that experience at a protest, and it would have been what you were hoping for, that you would have found like-minded others who wanted to express themselves in ways that are joyful and clear and wonderful and courageous and all of that, and you wouldn't have had to risk your life, which is what, from watching those videos, certainly there were people in life-threatening situations. So anyway, sorry to interject. So then what happened?
Well, I was super emotional because last week I just found out what misogyny was, and this last weekend.
No, you knew what misogyny was. You just didn't have a
yes.
word for it.
You
absolutely knew.
Experienced.
Yeah, I mean, you've had a hard life, Amie, and you've come out on top. So give yourself some credit. You just didn't have the language for it, and that is like that is the goal. As anybody who's a political activist, is to give people the language that describes their experience finally, because otherwise we are all just lost in this chaotic sea of pain that makes no sense. And then somebody says a word like misogyny and you go, right. It's not just me. Right. This is the thing that happens in the world, and there's like people doing it and people being victimized by it. I get it. And that's such an incredible moment for all of us. So I'm glad you had it. And I'm really sad that your life has been so hard. And I'm also, just give yourself some credit, because you've lived through it. I mean, you absolutely know what this is, but getting to the language is like, it's just a whole nother level of now what you can do.
It was so validating.
Yeah.
I've had so many aha moments and eye openers since we've met. But that was super emotional. Aside from, being able to tag what misogyny really is, seeing just our civil rights, our ability to speak, realizing that we as women, did we ever even have any rights to begin with for them to steal? That was kind of a mountaintop moment, because there were young women who were super misogynistic. It was really it was bizarre. I couldn't understand how there could be any women who were opposing the moms that were there and angry that their children had been exposed to a grown naked man in a very intimate setting. What kind of young lady would promote that or would find a reason to justify that? It's beyond, I don't have the capacity to understand that at all. But then when I saw people getting bullied, these weren't, it's not like it was me. These were grown-ups. These were like moms, people that were just being quiet, just there like me in observance. They weren't violent. There was a young couple that was just not even a full block in front of us, and they had a sign that was, making reference to some anti-pedo slogan, and they were pushed and they were, assaulted. If I were to put my hands on somebody like that, I would go directly to prison. And it was super confusing because I would go to prison for a long time, being that I have priors, but these people were physically contacting, slapping people's glasses off of their faces, pulling their hats off of their heads, kicking them. That was just the beginning. So they ran that couple off. And it still hadn't really hit me how dangerous the situation was at all. I had no concept of how dangerous the whole event was, the whole organized chaos of this was. After that, we were just talking. It was just the four of us, just talking, observing, tripping out, taking pictures, and they found us. They pointed us out. They started yelling at us on the loudspeakers. I've never been called a Karen before. That's a first. So, what are you doing here, Karen? You transphobe. Karen, go home. And it was, for me, I was pretty shocked. I didn't get it. And I feel that it just came as a direct result of us not screaming like police. I wasn't there for that. I wasn't there for that at all. And they were screaming trans lives matter as they were harassing people. And I was super confused at that point because I don't see, how is that trans activism? I don't see how that was defending trans rights by defending a man who wants to be naked by little girls. It wasn't adding up. But it was agitating them that we weren't responding. I wasn't going to feed into it, being that I have priors and I'm not going to go back to prison for this.
Well, that's wise. I'm glad that you didn't get sucked into something that was going to affect your life. But it sounds like, from what I saw in the video and from what you're saying, the police did nothing.
Oh,
they just stood there doing nothing while people were assaulted.
I actually thought maybe they were in cahoots because there was no police interaction whatsoever. And I'm not a cop caller. I'm not even a big fan of law enforcement in general. But I called the cops. I was advised, make sure you call the cops if something bad happens. So at one point I called the cops 3 times. And again, there was so much going on that I wasn't thinking logically. I'm calling the police and they're standing right in front of me. So it was pointless. I'm talking to the operator, and once they after they finally answered, he says, do you want me to send a unit out? I said, I think all your units are here. Can you send, I don't know, send somebody else? Because they're not intervening on any level. People were literally being assaulted in front of them, and they weren't even looking. Once the group came over to where I was and started pushing around the 2 people that I had met up with, the cops were literally we were on the sidewalk, they were in the middle of the street. So that's just a few feet away from us. And afterwards, after we had, dispersed, and one of the ladies had to run, and then, my boyfriend had to try and pull the other one out. They came over a few minutes later to try and talk, and, I'm not going to talk to him at that point. But there was everything seemed to the opposite. Right was wrong and wrong was right. And there was just no assistance from the police whatsoever. It almost seemed like they were afraid, or they were very reluctant to do anything.
Yeah, I don't think most people, across the country realize what's happened. That after all the rioting last year, that the police have really been stood down, and they don't intervene. We've seen it night after night in some cities. They will do nothing. Mm-hmm. And I don't know where that leaves us, as a society. The whole point of the social contract is that we give up our ability to be violent, and the state is supposed to protect us instead. And then we go to court and work out whatever problems there are, however we've been hurt or violated. We're supposed to work that out using evidence and various principles about innocent to proven guilty and all these things. And we have rights in those situations. But if all of that is going to go by the wayside, if in fact we've handed this over to the state, but now the state says, well, we're not going to protect you, and we're not going to protect your rights, and we're not even going to protect your physical safety, then where does that leave us? And I find this very chilling. Mm-hmm. So yeah, anyway, so all right, so the police didn't help, and your boyfriend had to intervene. And I've seen some of the videos of the women being surrounded and harassed just one by one. You've got middle-aged women, like you said, standing there very quietly, just making their point, and they are harassed, they are assaulted. It's absolutely terrifying to watch. And this is, I don't know how I don't care which side of any argument you're on, I don't know how that behavior is ever acceptable. I mean, I'm somebody who's very, very pro-choice. And if I saw somebody who was anti-choice being treated that way, I would intervene. I don't care. It's not about who I agree with. It's about our basic behaviors with each other in civil society, and what's okay and what's not. And they're just breaking every boundary, and this doesn't end well.
There was no code of conduct. There was no respect for anyone. I mean, I don't come from a place or live in a state of mind where hitting, well, not anymore, but hitting isn't okay. Definitely not touching, not, even getting in somebody's face like that. I don't know on what planet this is acceptable. There were like 4 Christians, 4 street preachers that got out of a car and were just right behind me. And before I knew it, they were getting hit in the face with skateboards, and their signs were anti-pedo. Their signs didn't say anything in regards to trans anything. It just was anti-pedo, which there's so many different ways that my mind was going at that point. I started to think, what is everybody defending pedophilia here? I was so confused, because then is this ushering in an era where that is now going to become pushed as an acceptable sexual orientation as opposed to a crime? Because it was being so heavily defended, because the people only had signs that were anti-pedo. And then once we spread out, my boyfriend and I knew we weren't going to be able to go directly back to our car. So we were hitting corners, trying to bob and weave, and we were being followed. And I'm trying to get pictures, and they're tailing us, staying, a respectable different distance behind us. But if anywhere we stopped, they were there. We stopped to get a soda, they were there. And looking back at the footage, it was a completely different group of people. It was the people that are allegedly the far right that were walking us to the car. And I think that it was in an effort to prevent us from getting jumped. That was even more confusing, because
I know, right now it's like, there's nothing good on either side.
no.
I don't want anything to do with them either. So yeah, but they were looking out for you. So okay,
Right.
That's another level of weirdness in this whole thing.
It was super weird.
Yeah.
It was like, wait a minute, are those the Proud Boys walking us home? Wow. Because
Oh dear, right.
it was wild. But then nobody had any, 100% insignia or anything on where you could identify anybody without a doubt. And plus, I think there were some people that were in a disguise of a disguise of a disguise.
Right.
But once we got within, feet of the police and my car, we were alone. Well, we weren't being tailed anymore. And there was this huge standoff between LAPD and another mob of people. There was somebody from MacArthur Park, like a regular homeboy who was just trying to defend his neighborhood. And people were charging him. There were, let me see, it was at least 10 to 1. And he's, smacking people with the rosary, trying to get them away from him. And instead of trying to disperse the crowd, the police put him in cuffs, the individual that was being attacked. So that it was just heartbreak after heartbreak. I'm getting sadder and sadder just seeing, our democracy literally falling apart in front of my eyes. But to see that the way they took the victim instead of the perps was very deeply disturbing. And
It's
that's
really galling. I mean, to me, I just have such a strong innate sense of justice and wanting to stand up for whoever's being victimized. And that kind of thing just, it's just like, you can't sleep at night. It makes you so enraged because it's not the way it's supposed to be.
No.
And the bullying too, like watching that entire mob of people just go after like one woman at a time, or, like the couple you mentioned, like this is one couple, and they just, the way that they circle them and they just hound them, like the terror on their faces, it's just ghastly. And I don't know how you can be that person who's inflicting terror on somebody in a mob like that. I don't know how that.
And it's not like it was just one individual.
No, it's not a one-off. They came meaning to do this.
They were all in the same state of mind. They were all very angry and hateful. They were circling me like sharks. Nobody touched me. I don't know if they knew that it was going to be a really bad day or what was going to happen, but nobody directly touched me. They just used all these different forms of intimidation. I don't even know what to compare them to, but I feel like all of the aftermath and all the tactics that they've used to promote and celebrate the event, it's like American ISIS. This isn't something that we're familiar with, that anybody has any understanding of what the depth of how deep this hate really goes. And it's just blind hate.
And the media basically won't cover it, and that's part of the problem. So, I mean, I've been through like what you're talking about. I've been in these situations before a bunch of times now over the last few years, where it's that same group of people who are, call themselves, Antifa, and it's Antifa's not a group. Just stop. Okay, they are a group. I know anybody can join, but they have a set of principles. They come to these kinds of events. They have a belief system. They've got their list of who's the good guys and who the bad guys are, and they all know what tactics they consider acceptable. So I have been up against them before, and it's just utterly terrifying when you see that level of hatred coming at you. I mean, we got out just kind of barely with our lives at one point, and they're like pounding on our car like it's zombie apocalypse.
It is so zombie apocalypse.
You just see these faces just screaming at you through the window, and they're pounding with all their might. And you just think, well, this is really how it happens. It's if they get into this car and they drag us into the street, it's over. And we're going to be hanging from the lamppost. This is just like.
And it's justified. It's not justified, but it's not. This is, they get a pass. I don't understand.
No, and they've made this little subculture where they're allowed to do this, and this is the acceptable way to behave, and it's the righteous way to behave. Whereas in my world, no matter how radical we were, there's not a chance in hell we would have done this to anybody. It's just so wrong. Of course, you don't terrorize people, and you absolutely are not going to do them physical harm. You don't want to. I would never want to drag somebody out of the car and beat them up. I can't imagine that being my impulse. It's like, what? This is just not what you do to make, especially it's not what you do to make change in the world. So
I don't think they're not functioning on that level though. They're not.
No, they're not. There's something else totally going on. It's not that. They think that's what it is. I mean, they have it morally justified, but that's not what they're doing. But I mean, you look at their eyes, you look at that expression, you think, well, they really would torture us to death if they could. And nobody believes us because the media won't cover it. And that's the thing I think I find most frustrating is that we've been through round after round of this. All the women that I know have been through this, and nobody believes us because the mainstream media won't touch it and the left media won't touch it. And that leaves us with nobody, except every once in a while, there'll be like, Tucker Carlson might mention something. And of course, he's got it completely, he's only got part of the story correct. Or, you have people like Andy Ngo, who everybody hates, but, at least he'll document it on his Twitter feed. And then it's like, how dare you use anything from his feed because he's a quote fascist. Like,
but that doesn't even make sense. How are they all day they're crying about they're this anti-fascist? You are in fact a fascist when you're trying to oppress people by eliminating their ability to speak against beliefs.
It's left-wing authoritarianism. And I'm 56 years old. I never thought it would come to this. So we're up against a lot more than we thought. That has become quite clear over the last few years. It's interesting to me that there are now these little explosion points like the spa where you've got people who never knew about this, were not in this fight before, and they have no idea that the laws have changed to the point that what that man did is perfectly legal. So women are going to have to peak one by one as this comes and affects their lives, as their children are traumatized, as they're terrified, as they suddenly realize, well, I'm not safe here. This should have been a good place for me to come, be with my female friends, my girl child. We were going to have a day, sitting in the spa and the sauna and, doing the loofah and all that and relax. This is, a cultural practice. And suddenly it's not safe. There's a naked man. they're going to have to understand that this has happened when nobody was paying attention. There were a few of us out here screaming, like, they're changing the law, people, like, women doesn't exist anymore. It's not a classification that they're allowed to use anymore. It's all gender identity. And nobody believed us. And now here we are. So one by one, women are going to have to understand what has happened, how much we've lost, because we have lost so much ground. And of course, the women in prison and the women in the homeless shelters are the ones who are most at risk here, because where else are they going to go? At least in a spa, you can leave. You're locked in a prison cell. And this is why I can't bear it. I mean, this is why I'm so glad that, you're fighting this with us, because there's nobody to speak for those women. And I don't understand it. It's such a profound injustice what's happening to them. But we need just the normies. We need just like the regular people to understand how bad it is and what it means. That these are the things, these are the levels of violation and terror that are now going to be happening to women and girls. So as awful as it is, yes, like, women are going to have these terrible experiences to understand that we're not making it up. I'm sorry the media is not covering it. So it's going to have to be one by one that they learn about it.
I mean, I'm guilty of it too. I didn't take anybody's word for it. I didn't think that it was going to be that bad. It's LA. What are they going to do? I didn't think it was going to be that intense. I had no, and people warned me, it's not like I went into this blind. They said, you can't do this. You shouldn't go. Well, come on, I'm just going to go watch. But knowing how I am, I shouldn't have been, so curious, because it was reckless. It was insanely reckless.
Yeah, but it shouldn't have been. You have a right to assemble.
Mm-hmm.
You have the First Amendment covers all of us. Like, you should have been able to be there, making whatever point you wanted to make, as long as you followed the rules and didn't obstruct anybody coming and going and kept moving and all the things and don't have a poll, like all the things they ask you to do. Perfectly legitimate things. Yes, you're not allowed to do X, Y, Z, but you are allowed to assemble and you're allowed to make your political point. That's your right.
That's what I thought. I always thought that.
We need to hold on to that. Like, don't give up. We can't give up the high ground here. Like, those are our rights.
Because at some point I was trying to rationalize and say, well, we can take to the internet and do our e-protests. And then I thought to myself, that's not cool. That's not cool. It's like laying down and dying. We just have to be more organized. We have to be as organized.
We need to be more organized, and we need to be, well, we're all going to have to be field generals. We're going to have strategy. We're going to have to learn to think like tacticians. So we're all going to have to be Joan of Arc, and we're all going to have to be Napoleon. We have to do it. I mean, it's so, like, is it strategic? Is it a winnable goal? Is it moral? We're going to have to answer all those questions, and people have already done this. Like, all kinds of amazing things have happened across the last 200 years to bring justice to really unbearable situations, and people have lost their lives for things like universal suffrage, for things like the Civil Rights Act of 1964. But how did they do it? And they did it. That's incredible. And they also, it wasn't random, like they figured out how to make social change happen. And I think there's a lot of women out there who don't know how to think that way, because no one has ever taught them how, and they haven't read the right books, or they haven't, they just haven't been engaged on that level. And it's very hopeful to me, because I think that if we do learn basic political strategy, the rage is there, the commitment is there, the passion is there. We certainly have truth on our side. We have righteousness on our side. There's no reason that we can't win our rights again. But we are going to have to apply ourselves to becoming the strategists that we need. So how are you feeling now? Like, what's sort of your take home about all of this?
Well, really, the last couple of days have been odd, because I even post incarceration, even after being, forgotten in a cage for several hours with waist chains and shackles, I don't think I was affected as much as I was by this particular event. I thought people were chasing me in the grocery store the other day. I just was extremely paranoid. I want to laugh, but it's not cool, because I've never I've never experienced like being shell shocked that tough. And I mean, I've been in some pretty heinous situations, but kind of just taking it all in and reflecting on everything, it's made me realize that we have to make some militant moves that, like you said, are strategic, and we're going to have to build some alliances, and we're going to have to think outside the box in ways that I don't think we ever have before. Like I was just thinking of what kind of strong arm groups we could use for buffers and protection and future protests, because it's got to be collaborative in the future. It's got to be a united front from all different kinds of arenas. If anything, I believe there's a lot of groups that never would have walked together in an event like this that will be able to find common ground and see eye to eye on certain issues, because it's not so much right and left anymore. It's right and wrong now. I don't think that the parties are even significant anymore, because it seems like everybody at the top is bad.
And everybody, like, from both extremes, they're just authoritarians.
Mm-hmm.
Like, whether they think they're left or they're right, it's like the same behaviors, and it's just scary and appalling. So we've got to find the people still in the middle who understand that there's a better way. Mm-hmm. And that there's been, I mean, in my lifetime, I've seen really great changes happen in this country. And it's just really sad to think that we could lose it all and fall apart into something, balkanize into, this kind of endless, like, low-level civil war. I don't think anybody wants that, except for people really on the extremes. Most people really don't want to live in that kind of a
Mm-hmm.
world. I think it's better to figure out how we can all get along and all, take care of each other in a better way. That's just such a basic human value to me. We're super social, right? That's, as a species, that's what we are. And we have a really strong impulse to care for each other, because our young are dependent for so long. It's really just built into our psychology. We'd rather take care of each other than fight each other. I mean, we get post-traumatic stress when we're in war. It's not good for us. So I think there's a better way. Yeah, but I think mothers are a huge untapped resource in this. I mean, just that the ferocious love for children, that is always a motivating force in history. That it always doesn't always get sung. It's an unsung force, but it's there. And I think those are women who really, I think, would rise to the occasion if they were given a reason to fight and a way to fight that looked like it made sense. Because right now, none of this makes sense. But women like yourself who are trying to help, who have a survivor mission, who are trying to help women who have been in really bad situations and want to start again and maybe have a second shot, and you're trying to help women like that. And the state has just made it so much worse for them now, because they're going to be so traumatized by having these men in there. But there's a lot of people who do that kind of prisoner support, and they don't understand how bad this is. So I mean, that's another kind of political kind of body that could potentially be on the right side if they could get themselves to just understand and look at it through women's eyes for once. But no, I agree. I mean, I think there's a lot of groups that are untapped, and it's mostly because, I'll just say this again, the media is not covering this. We've had nothing but just a rather massive blackout on this issue, really, for a decade. So it's up to us, really. I mean, we've got to make enough noise. We've got to make enough good trouble that the media will cover it. And I look forward to being there with you, Amie.
Well, me too. I'm excited. We just have to go. We have to go hard. Their propaganda. We just have to yell over their propaganda, and we can get loud. And I think together we can make enough noise to block out what they're trying to push and force on our entire country. Well, I don't know. It's kind of seeming like it's worldwide. After doing some research, it really seems like it's not just here.
It's not just here. It's in I mean, dozens and dozens of countries now, and some of them have. Japan's been great; they've been able to fight it off, but other countries have fallen. So, of course, we talk about England as turf island because they've had great success there. But it's been a struggle. I mean, they really had to get together, and they had to really fight. And we're not there yet in the United States. There's not enough of us, but we will get there. I mean, we're going to have to. So, we'll take our inspiration where we can.
I'm ready.